Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the GCS Inclusion Series. I'm really excited to be hosting today's episode. My name is Betty. I manage all of our GCS Connect content and events. And I'm excited to introduce our guest today. So I'm going to bring out Ekow Sanni-Thomas. And our topic for today will be on accountability and transparency and what that has to do with diversity and inclusion. So Ekow, welcome to the series. Thanks for coming on today.
Hi, Betty. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. And Ekow, do you want to just really quickly run through a brief introduction to yourself?
Sure. So, hi, I'm Ekow. I'm the founder of Inside Voices. Inside Voices is an online platform that helps job seekers understand how companies really treat people of color before they join. It gives you an opportunity to hear from real employees, and they can discuss how race-related outcomes impact that workplace. We've been live for about a year. My background is actually in real estate finance before this, and I really moved to this really as a mission that I felt that needed to be accomplished, something that we needed to add some transparency to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you brought up that you came over from the kind of real estate industry, because being from a recruitment agency in technology, like we always come across, engineers and everyone from very different backgrounds that, didn't start off in technology. So everyone's coming from all types of industries. But just to kind of lead on to Inside Voices, Ekow, did you want to kind of share, I guess, what led to the creation of Inside Voices?
Sure. So Inside Voices was really born out of the lack of transparency for job seekers of color. Job seekers of color particularly, need to join diverse and inclusive companies. Over 80% of people across the board say they want to join diverse and inclusive companies, but for people of color, it's a need, it's not a want. But it's not possible to tell which companies those are before you join. And often companies pull a bait and switch where their reputation says one thing, but what's actually happening within the company, the culture of the organization is very different. The values of leadership don't actually embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a result, you have people coming into the workforce and feeling like they've been misled, feeling as though the organization doesn't actually value them, isn't in line with the things that they believe in. And often you have people leaving, feeling mistreated. They often try to stay a little bit longer than they intend to. So our aim is to sort of lift the veil and give people an opportunity to look inside companies before they get there. And this isn't just for job seekers of color. This is for anybody who believes that diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important way for them to decide about where they're going to join. Anybody that considers that anti-racism work an important part of their life and their values. We ask current employees about race-related outcomes like representation in leadership, diversity in the workforce, inclusion, and then we post those responses anonymously so that job seekers can come and do a little due diligence on companies before they join. Companies do a background check on you. You should be able to do a background check on companies as well.
I love that. And I love the idea of kind of describing it as the Glassdoor for diversity and inclusion, because I think we've all read Glassdoor reviews on companies we're about to join. And that does make a difference. It does make a difference when you're hearing real reviews from those who have previously worked for the company you're about to join. It's funny, Ekow, when you kind of brought up, the fact that diversity and inclusion has become almost like a buzzword for a lot of companies. Everyone will include it now in their values, but it's true. It's a question of whether or not they actually will prioritize that, in the way they run their business. But, I guess in your opinion, why in particular is this platform, important and so powerful nowadays, especially in this kind of a job market?
I mean, right now we're seeing employee loyalty at an all-time low, right? And we're seeing job seekers be more choosy, more picky than they've ever been before. And part of that's born out of, just the economics of what happened to people's lives in the pandemic. But that's also given people a realization that they can make more decisions. They have more power than they believed they had before. And that's really what Inside Voices taps into. Inside Voices is about power of the people. The fact that a statistic like 80% of people want to work for diverse and inclusive companies, but over 65% of people think their company should be doing more to be diverse and inclusive, demonstrates that we're not having the impact on the companies that we create as much as we want to. Every single company is made up of people just like you and me, who the vast majority want the company to be doing more. but it's hard to get your hands on those levers of power. Now, I don't necessarily advocate that anybody should stay in an organization to change it from the inside unless they have a position of power. But what this does is this shifts power from leaders to us. And the way that it does that is by sharing information. People often don't realize that sharing information and knowledge is important diversity work, because what it does is we all know knowledge is power, so it transfers power into the hands of the oppressed or the people that are being held down. By sharing that information, we can get some transparency and we can really start to vote with our feet about which companies we want to work at and which companies we don't. Right? And when people often also don't realize that there's actually a competition for talent happening right now, I'm sure you're aware of this in recruitment, there's always a competition for talent happening. And when companies start to lose that competition for talent, they start to ask questions about why. You spoke about Glassdoor, and Glassdoor is a place where companies often look to understand why they're not able to recruit the talent that they want. But we also want to be another platform like that, where people look to understand why are people not coming to us at the speed that we want them to. And in this case, it will be because they can see that the company does not stand for the values that it claims to, that it doesn't actually value people of color, and in often cases mistreats people of color. Once we start voting with our feet and it gets harder for companies to recruit, then it starts to hit their bottom line. And once it hits their bottom line, then they will reform. I like the idea of the business case behind diversity and then it can lead to more profits. Unfortunately, I think that's a little bit too long term for most companies to use to make decisions. I think we need to shorten the time horizon for those incentives and say, actually, you don't need to wait 3, 4, 5, 10 years to start making more profits from diversity. If you don't get more diverse right now, you don't get more inclusive right now, then we're not going to come to work there, and then see how hard it is to achieve your company objectives.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely a more direct result that companies will see much quicker. Like you said, I think a lot of people have to realize that it is a long-term kind of game, and with diversity, inclusion, and building that as well. And in your opinion, do you think enough companies are being held accountable when it comes to kind of how they are improving their D&I strategies, or how they're working towards improving D&I within their business?
Sadly, no, no, not at all. And this is why we exist, but our work has only just begun. It's actually quite sad to see that people's expectations of the level of accountability that they can get from companies are at the floor. People basically just assume, through lived experience, that they will never be able to get to the truth of which companies are diverse and which companies are not. Something really interesting happened a couple of weeks ago. I think it was right at the beginning of Women's History Month. There was a bot on Twitter that for every company that tweeted about its dedication to women, to its female employees and celebrating Women's History Month, it responded with a tweet about their gender pay gap.
Yes, I think I saw that bot. I forgot what the name of it was, but I saw it shared on LinkedIn as well, and I definitely had a peek.
Yeah. Now, that bot was only possible because in the UK, there's legislation that says that companies have to disclose their gender pay gap. And because that information was publicly available, they were able to use that information to shame them. This has the same premise, but unfortunately, we can't wait for legislation to get involved. If we're frank, the UK government is in no rush to fix this problem, and I don't see the US government moving at speed either. The closest we're getting is talking about boardroom diversity, and the 6 to 8 people that you have in the boardroom are not necessarily going to change everything that happens within the actual company. So what we need to do is, by getting more transparency, this bot has demonstrated that more transparency can lead to opportunities for us to name and shame and hold companies accountable and say, listen, we can see you saying these things which are performative, right? Companies love diversity theater, as it's called, where they sort of demonstrate their values without having to actually live those values. Companies love that. With this information, with it being publicly available, we can start to hold them accountable. But unfortunately, when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to race, and largely often when it comes to gender, unfortunately, we're nowhere near able to do that at the moment.
Absolutely. And so I myself and Aaron Keep from GCS were actually very D&I is actually really close to our hearts, but he is always a stickler for that, especially when we have, say, a day coming up like International Women's Day, he always says, he writes an email, he's like, I don't want to just do a post, like a social media post is just, it's disingenuous, and like, let's think of stuff that we can actually do, or like a campaign we do, even sharing more information on different groups that are trying to, to improve diversity and inclusion. And yeah, so that's something that he is definitely a stickler for. And, we're trying not to be that company that is just doing it for show. But actually on that note too, we took a look at our own Glassdoor reviews, and I was actually gutted because, for our own, we actually just scored, I think it was like a 3.5 on diversity and inclusion ourselves, which again, I was gutted just because we're doing so much work and trying to improve that within our own organization. But at the same time, it's a good reminder that, there's still a lot of work to do, and not to kind of rest on our laurels. That's why we're trying to improve, the way we are, hosting these dialogues, these sessions, these roundtable sessions, the inclusion series, to try and continue that continuous education to our network. But, we're also doing internal training for our consultants, because I personally feel we're in a very unique position as a recruitment agency to really make a difference when it comes to kind of the hiring, and hopefully consult with our clients in a way that we can also help them improve diversity inclusion within their own organizations as well.
100%. 100%. And I'm glad to hear that your company's taking the time to look into those reviews. You really want to understand, what is at the genesis of those, and speak to employees, former and current, to do a deep dive. It's really important that leadership be listening and taking action. These things do often feel easy to sweep under the rug, and it often feels as though you're never going to be able to make a dent in it. Training is one part of it, but there are also policies that need to change. This is not just about getting the people in the door and trying to reduce the bias of the people in the organization. But one thing that I often harp on is, there are people in the organization that make mistakes and do things that are counter to what the company wants all the time. That is just the nature of human beings. But every company has controls in place, methods in place to make sure that those people's mistakes or things that don't serve the company don't make it into the company's decisions. We need that same level of rigor when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion.
Absolutely. And Ekow, you touched on transparency before as well. I was going to say, like, how would you say a lack of transparency can impact a company?
So there's several ways that lack of transparency impacts. And one is there's an insidious nature to siloed working, to a feeling that you can't share information with coworkers. Lots of companies, actually the majority of companies, try to dissuade people from sharing their pay. I actually encourage people to share their pay with their coworkers. People don't realize that sharing pay information is diversity, equity, inclusion work, right? Because informing people who may be being paid less for reasons that are, illegal, right? Let's not forget that DEI work when it comes to pay equity, paying people less because they're a woman, paying people less because they're a person of color. These things are illegal, but the only way that people can get that information is if other people share their salaries, because most companies will not share their salaries. In the US in particular, companies love to dissuade people from sharing their salaries, but it is actually illegal to tell people that they are not, to forbid people from sharing their salaries in the US. So sorry, go on.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say, I know I always, for some reason, thought of sharing your salaries as a very no, you should not do it. Like, it's a very private thing, but you're right. In sharing that information, it does actually kind of encourage more diversity and inclusion, because you're encouraging that transparency. There's no secrets.
Exactly. And we saw that a few years ago. I think it was the BBC, where they had to share the amount that their top earners were making. And we saw male presenters saying that they wanted to, or saying that they would have their pay be reduced so they were in line with their female presenters, or have the female presenters' pay be increased. And it was only because there was that transparency, suddenly the pressure was put on the company and put on the individuals to say, okay, we need to align this. This doesn't make sense. The other way that transparency can really, transparency can really benefit an organization is, particularly where we are right now, where there already is a groundswell of support for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, people want it, but companies are not necessarily so quick to get on board. And often companies are finding that by the time they're ready to get involved in the conversation, there's such a trust deficit between them and their employees. The employees say, well, you're taking this long to get into it. How do we know that you're dedicated to this? Transparency is a great way to cover that gap, because the reality is we already know you're not where you want to be, right? Most companies are not doing good, they're not very good at this, they're not doing well. But by being transparent, releasing ethnicity pay gap statistics, releasing diversity statistics, just being honest, those things will actually do a lot in winning over the employees that you had previously lost who didn't believe that the company was committed to this, and will probably buy you 6 to 12 months in terms of time to get your act together and start to actually improve the policies and procedures that you go through that are leading to the problem. Because just admitting the problem in that frank way is so radical right now, that, you know, people working in companies are so surprised that it happens. They're like, okay, it seems like something's changing here. Let's give them a minute to see what they can do.
Absolutely. I think it gains a company a lot of respect from their teams and from others who are looking into the company and who's looking to joining, you know, even if, you know, they have a lot to improve on. People are at different stages in their kind of journey towards DE&I, but I completely agree with you. I think it says a lot about a company if you're able to kind of put that information out there and you know, share that information with your employees, for sure. And, you know, I guess, like, what would you say to a leader if they were a little bit afraid, you know, being that transparent with their organization? You know, if they were, say, again, a little bit early in their stages towards their, you know, their journey towards DE&I, and, you know, it's kind of a big ship to turn around. What would you say to them who are kind of a little bit afraid to take that first step?
It's hard to say be brave. It feels unfair to say be brave to someone who's afraid. But remember that bravery requires fear, right? It's only bravery if you're overcoming fear. And I would say that this is the direction that this needs to go in. You are not going to improve under the cover of darkness. That's just not reality, right? Without the pressure of public opinion, without the pressure of visibility, there's no reason to make significant change. And without those incentives, you're just going to languish, and it's actually going to be more detrimental, because people are going to hear the things that you're saying about what you want to do, but because you won't make any actual meaningful progress, they'll believe that you were never actually committed to it in the first place. And, you know, let's put this into the perspective of every other objective that companies have, right? When it comes to revenue projections, companies don't make revenue projections under the cover of darkness and then hope to hit them, right? You publish them. You speak to the stakeholders in the business. You speak to your board. You tell your employees, these are the goals that we're trying to hit. And then on the way, you tell people, this is where we're getting to along the way. These are the methods that we're going to take to get there. And then when you get there, you say, look, we did it, we achieved it, or we failed. And these are the reasons why, and we all need to be held accountable, and we're all disappointed. This is just another company objective, and we shouldn't treat it differently, right? One of the strange things that we do when it comes to DEI work is we talk about the problem instead of trying to fix the problem. So, you know, if a company had an issue with sales, they would never hold an all hands meeting to talk about the importance of sales, right? They would just say, we have an issue with sales. We're going to hire more salespeople. We're going to change our sales processes, right? We have to hit these goals. These are imperative to the survival of the company. Well, in the same way, we shouldn't just be having, you know, events and having conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We should be saying, hey, we are failing miserably. We need to do something right now. And I'm happy to talk about it publicly, because this is something that we're committed to. And unfortunately, if we fail, the whole company fails, right? It needs to be tied to objectives. It needs to be top down, you know, flowing through the culture and the belief of the organization. Everybody needs to be involved in helping to achieve that goal. People need to know that leaders are committed to that goal. And the leadership, if you are feeling like you are afraid, I would say, you know, do the training, get that cultural competency so that you can speak about it without feeling afraid, because I think that sometimes is part of the problem. I think sometimes leaders are scared to get into conversation. So have the training so that you personally can have those conversations, and then just charge forward, charge straight ahead. If you look, it's like a game of chicken. If you look back, if you blink, people will question whether you're really committed. You need to sprint at this 100% with your eyes wide open. You need to let the world know this is what we're doing, and then just do your best. The reality is, if a company just does its best, it will outstrip 95% of the other companies.
Absolutely. And you know, it's funny because when you, I really like that sales analogy. That's like a perfect way to put it. And so, you know, with our conversations and our you know, our roundtables and all of that, we really do try and take a solutions-based lens, because I think a lot of companies are ready, you know, they understand it's important and they're ready, but like you said, we have to kind of stop just talking about D&I in and of itself, but look towards solutions. What are some practical ways, companies can improve within their business? And and just I know we're nearing the end of our time there, Ekow, but I just wanted to ask, so with Inside Voices, how have you seen the reception so far for Inside Voices since you started?
It's been very positive. I mean, professionals of color immediately understand why we need this, right? Anybody that's been in an organization is immediately ready to embrace this. They know that transparency is really what the missing key to the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation. People often don't realize, but in the US, almost 1 in 2 Black and Hispanic employees has quit after witnessing or experiencing discrimination at work. So this is an extremely common problem. People are dying for a solution, and people are picking it up. So, if there's anybody listening right now that is wondering about it, I just advise them to go to www.insidevoices.io, read some reviews, write a review. Writing a review, whether you are a person of color or you're not, writing a review is important anti-racism work. It is helping our fight towards a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce and corporate environment.
Absolutely. And Ekow, I just wanted to end with a very positive comment from Charlie here. He says that he'll be stealing your sales analogy with regards to D&I. So again, lots of great takeaways to take from today's session. But again, Ekow, thank you so much for the fantastic work that you're doing and for being a guest today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.